Welcome back to our delicious conversation with Dr. Greg Hammer. When it comes to managing your stress, you've got to look no further than Greg Hammer. He is a Stanford University School of Medicine professor, a pediatric intensive care physician, and a pediatric anesthesiologist. That word is like so difficult for me. He is also the author of Gain Without Pain. In part one of the show, we talked a lot about the vagus nerve. We talked about stress. We talked about not being in denial, but moving ourselves away from suffering, which means recognizing pain, seeing pain for what it is, but not hanging on to it for dear life and claiming it as some kind of an identity, which very easily and often happens for a lot of people. And we finished off part one of the show talking about the importance of connecting with your vagus nerve. And this is obviously something, it's a nerve, it's inside your system, but that you actually can have a proactive interaction with it through breathing, through cold, through pressure. And these are ways to manage your own anxiety or the stress that you're under. And, as I talked about right at the beginning of the show, it's very easy to get caught up in all of this. There's a lot of stress, potentially more stress than we've ever known before. I want to talk about here in a very real way. In our previous conversation, not part one, but in an offline conversation, we talked about this Venn diagram of what it is that leads us to either professional fulfillment or professional burnout and how to manage that and work with that. Talk to us a little bit about that, if you could, please.
Sure. So when it comes to the workplace, one can imagine three domains and, they sort of overlap, sort of like the five rings of the Olympics. But I like to keep things simple. I think the three domains that lead to professional fulfillment when they're in harmony or burnout when they're not are, first of all, the culture of the workplace. So this is things like microaggressions, people discriminating against those who are different. Are there a lot of special deals where you're working next to somebody who's being paid twice as much as you are for doing the same work? Right. Those are all cultural things. The second one is the efficiency of our practice. So at least in medicine, for example, if I'm working in the operating room and I've got 3 cases, and instead of taking 10 minutes to clean the room and get the OR ready for the next case, it takes 45 minutes. Then I'm going home an hour and a half or 2 hours later than I need to be, and I'm missing dinner with my family and so on. It's just one small example of efficiency. If we work in a very inefficient environment, we're going to be frustrated and we're going to get home late if we're actually at the workplace. So culture, efficiency, and then the third domain, Dov, is really the one I'm most interested in, and that's resilience. Resilience is something that is really up to us. Whereas I think
is this word that's thrown around. You and I talked about this before. It's thrown around, and I don't think people understand what it means. I've often talked about, I used to be very resilient, thank God I'm not anymore, in the context of what it is. And resilience was seen as this, punch me, knock me down 7 times, I'll get up 8. And that's not what you're talking about in the context of resilience. Is that correct?
I'm going to give you my own definition, but I'm going to give it as a simple definition in keeping with the KISS principle. And also in the context of our discussion, Dov, we talked about acute stress.
Yes.
And acute stress means activation of the sympathetic nervous system, lots of adrenaline, lots of cortisol. Those evolved through evolution as adaptive responses. They help us fight or flee. However, they're now mostly triggered by our thoughts, which is not so great. But regardless, we all experience acute stress. Resilience means the ability to neutralize those acute stress responses so that they don't become chronic. So you get slapped, proverbially slapped or knocked down, your heart rate goes up, you have all these adaptive responses, your cortisol goes up, you're upset, you're anxious, your blood pressure goes up. As long as you can neutralize those responses quickly, bring your heart rate back down, maybe activate the vagus nerve. Bring your cortisol level back down by learning how to render yourself calm. That's resilience. If you're not resilient and you get knocked down, you can't get up. So I guess with regard more to a physiologic reference, you have an acute stress response, your cortisol's up, your adrenaline's up. You're not able to neutralize those. And so your cortisol and adrenaline end up being elevated for a long time. And that's when they really erode your health and your longevity. So resilience is really the ability to neutralize the acute stress response so that you don't have chronic stress.
So that's really important, and I want everybody to grasp that for a moment, because a lot of the time particularly in the cultural conditioning we've received, resilience is the ability to go on with whatever it is. And that's not what you're talking about at all. You're talking about resilience as this ability to neutralize that system. As I said, I used to be resilient, which means you could piss me off and upset me, and I would just keep going with that, and it would just make me tough-headed. It wasn't making me resilient. It was wearing on my body, it was wearing on my nervous system, wearing on my mind. It was having impact on me in ways because I wasn't resilient at neutralizing the system. And the analogy I give people all the time, and this is not politically correct, but it's still me, so it's not offensive to anybody, but it's me. And that is, if I'm driving down the road and you cut me off, you being whoever cuts me off, I will swear and I will shout things. I'll never do anything external. It's in the car. My wife will often say, I can hear you, they can't. Right? But the interesting thing about it is, if you put me in one car and you had me wired up with all kinds of sensors, checking my heart rate, my blood pressure, my breathing, etc., and you had somebody else in another vehicle and they didn't get upset, and you measured our heart rate and our stress levels and our levels of cortisol and adrenals and all this other things, you'd probably find theirs are lasting much longer than mine, because I have learned to express it and drop it. So I'm completely calm, and actually I'm laughing about it 3-4 seconds later, and I feel completely calm and I have nothing left in my system. Whereas this idea of, put on the happy face, repress and deny is exactly the opposite of what you're talking about. So I really want people to get this. I know I keep hammering this home, but it's not denial. It's being with it, and at the same time not letting it control you, and having these systems, these ways of dealing with it, like you talked about before, with the breathing, with the pressure, with the cold, or whatever it may be, that you can do. And as you said earlier, Greg, the breathing is something you can do immediately. You don't have to wait to get home and get a bag of frozen bees. You can do it right now. You can do it as you're listening to this and you're feeling stressed about whatever it might be, by following that breathing that Greg gave you in part 1. If you didn't hear it, go back and listen to part 1. It's a very simple strategy, but it can make an enormous difference. So now you've got these 3 areas. We talked about culture. What is the culture you're in that is going to decide whether you're living a fulfilled life or whether you're living a very stressed life? And then you've got the efficiency of the environment. Is that draining you? Is it inefficient? Is it destructive? Is it pulling you off in all kinds of ways? And then that third piece, putting all that together. So you've got the culture, you've got the efficiency, and then, give us the third one again.
Personal resilience.
Personal resilience. So the first 2, you can say, well, those are external. Okay, they're not really, but you can impact them internally. But the third one is absolutely internal. So how do you, if you're guiding somebody who's in a very stressful environment, who maybe has certainly the first 2 that seem out of their control, they don't have control of the culture, they don't have control of the efficiency, what's your guidance for them?
Absolutely. Those are sort of workplace. The context is those things in the workplace. Sometimes the culture is so negative and the efficiency of your workplace is so terrible that no matter how resilient you are, you're not going to be happy. So in that case, then I think you need to change jobs. And I suppose you could say that about where you live. I mean, where you live, you might live in an area where the culture is terrible, where you live with a bunch of people who have a very skewed point of view, and you can't really get friendly with your neighbors because their political views are very extreme and opposite yours. The efficiency might be such that you have to drive for a half hour to get groceries. I'm just sort of throwing that out there. I mean, your conditions can be so bad that no matter how resilient you are, you're not going to be fulfilled and happy. And so in that case, you need to change your environment. So if that's changing jobs, yes. However, I think for most of us, hopefully, the leadership is efficacious enough to have a reasonable culture and, reasonable efficiency of the workplace. And the rest is up to us with regard to resilience. The ways to make yourself more resilient are to, for example, practice the GAIN method. It's 3 or 4 minutes in the morning, deep breathing, followed by self-guided contemplative meditation of that for which we're grateful. Those uncomfortable or painful experiences we need to accept. Intention, meaning we focus on the present moment and also pledge to be more generous, loving, kind, open-hearted. And the N is non-judgment. I suggest ways of doing all of this. It's very accessible practice. And then we go back to the deep breathing and we're ready to go out in the world. It's a 3 or 4 minute practice in the morning, but then you learn slowly to really incorporate these ways of thinking and being into your life. And you learn to become more resilient in so doing.
So you said you have specific ways of doing these things. So give us a little bit of guidance around gratitude, because I think that oftentimes gratitude either becomes grandiose. I can't do it because I've got nothing to be grateful for because it's so grandiose. Or it becomes micro and it sort of misses a lot as well. So I know you have a very specific guidance. So let's just start with gratitude. What's your guidance around that?
Well, there are a lot of different ways to do it. One is, say we've settled in for 20 or 30 seconds to this deep breathing. We've activated the vagus nerve. Our heart rate is down. Our blood pressure and blood sugar are down. And as we breathe, we link the breath to thoughts of gratitude. I'm grateful for having a home, a roof over my head, food easily accessible to me. Just think for a moment about all the people in the world who don't have that. And we're listening to what's going on in Gaza and what's going on in Ukraine. How grateful am I that I don't have to worry about those things? How grateful am I that I've got loved ones in my life? I just got a second dog. These 2 dogs are such a source of love and unconditional love. How grateful am I? So we can just shoot the list, be it relatively short before we move on to acceptance, or focus on one element. I'm so grateful for my loving partner. But we have so much to be grateful for, Dov, obviously. I would say just about everybody who's listening to this. And, I lost my son. I'm so grateful for my daughter. So, it's like, okay, my left knee is swollen. I'm so grateful that my right knee is okay. And then I can get out of bed in the morning and demonstrate all this amazing physiology that's been at work all night.
That really leads into the A, which is the acceptance, because the thing with where people often can get stuck with gratitude is this situation is a piece of shit. It's terrible. And yes, it is. But is that the totality of the system? No. What else is there? Is this thing you're in that is miserable, overwhelming? Certainly. But is it the total of the system? No. So what is there in the system? I mean, I used to say to people, guy fell 120 feet off a mountain, got smashed to pieces, and, was messed up in a very large way. And if somebody had said to me, this is going to be the greatest gift of your life, I would have punched him in the neck. There's no way in the world I was seeing it that way in that moment. Is it that? Of course it was the greatest gift of my life up until that point. There's many more wonderful things since. But up until that point it was. But I couldn't see that at that time. But if I'd have had assistance, which I did have, I was able to see the other things I could be grateful. And I think that that's your point, is like, it's not like getting yourself out of the total system of, oh, it's all wonderful, which is bullshit, or it's all terrible, which is equally bullshit, which moves you into the A. So walk us through that A. I think that that's something that is profoundly important, that takes us out of any wishful thinking and just like, here's what it is.
Yeah, well, the physical body is really supported by 3 things, and that's sleep, exercise, and nutrition. And they're very tightly interwoven. We get tired, so we pick up fatty and sugary so-called comfort foods. We get a buzz, we crash, we're too tired to exercise. So sleep, exercise, nutrition, they're really woven together. And I think that elements of gain, similarly, as you suggested, gratitude, acceptance, intention, non-judgment, they are so tightly woven together. So one way for me to focus on gratitude is to be accepting of the things that apparently are negative. And we do have a negativity bias. We should recognize that. We all tend to focus on the negative and set the positive aside. It's important to recognize that because we're not alone in this. This is not our dirty little secret, right?
But we carry it around like it is. Everybody carries it around like, nobody's as negative as me. I got to put on the smiley face and pretend, because look at Bob over there. He's so positive all the time. Look at Susan. She's like, no, hold on a second. The same shit is running in their head.
Yeah, our brains are wired that way, and we could talk about why that is. We could talk about evolution. So the A, again, what we do in the gain meditation, at least what I teach and when I practice, and people can change it however they want over time. Actually, while we're doing our deep breathing, activating our vagus nerve, we're identifying a thought or experience that's uncomfortable or painful. So my son often comes to me. I have a meditation room. I have a shrine to my son. So I'm in my deep breathing. This experience of my son's death comes to me, and I actually envision opening my chest and opening my heart and bringing it closer and closer and closer till it's inside my heart, till I'm nurturing it with my heart. I'm befriending it. I'm welcoming it. I'm fully accepting it until I can ask myself the question, can I live with this pain forever? And the answer is yes. And then again, I go back to the deep breathing. I link this acceptance, this physical relaxation of the muscles in my body, nurturing this experience in my heart, and just reside and abide in that place for 15 seconds. And then I move on to intention. What happens is when I find that I'm resisting something uncomfortable, a light bulb goes off and I remember my gain meditation. And then I just resume the deep breathing and the sensation of bringing this into my heart. And the more we practice this, the more we're actually rewiring our brains to respond to something negative and uncomfortable and even painful like this. And again, we're becoming more resilient.
Yes. So let's take it into the I, because I think that that's also, intention is like, well, it's something that we think of as being future focused.
Well, it's sort of the difference between an intention and a goal. A goal is like a New Year's resolution. It's off in the distance. It's so easy to procrastinate. Intention for me is something for right now. This is what I intend to do right now. And so, again, we start with the deep breathing. And then, there's so many different ways to do this practice. But one would be to recognize that our brains are wired, beside being negative, to be very distracted and going to the future and the past in ways that are maladaptive. Let's rewire our brain a little bit to be more able to live in this present moment, because happiness lives in the present. So we can just link our deep breathing to our physical sensation, the pressure of the chair against our body, maybe the sound of a car or an airplane going by in the distance, the beauty of this slow, deep inhalation expanding our chest. So we focus maybe for 15 seconds even on our present experience. And then we can transition that into, my intention is to be a more loving, kind-hearted person today, to be more patient today, really right now, today. And then we link this to the deep breathing, and then we go on to the N.
So the N, I think it is important that it's at the end as opposed to at the beginning, because I think that a lot of people have it at the beginning. I should be less judgmental. And I would say, first, let's start here. You are a judgmental asshole like everybody else. It's part of our humanity. It's how we survive. You have to judge whether it's safe to walk off the curb. And you don't have to live in the judgment, though. And I think that that's the trap. That's the catch. So, we judge him over there with that haircut or her over there with that outfit or whatever it might be. And what does that have to do with me? Nothing. How does that help me survive? It doesn't. So that's the distinction versus trying to be non-judgmental. It's a trap because you're going to be judgmental. I believe what you're talking about here is not living in the judgment. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And, again, you bring in our negativity bias, so our judgments are more likely to be negative.
Of course.
With regard to others, the world, and most, unfortunately, ourselves. We are certainly our own worst and most harsh critic.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to distinguish between discerning and judging. We have to discern, like, I've got an hour for a lunch today. Do I want to have lunch with my buddy Dov, who's a great guy, who's very pragmatic, he's hilarious, I really enjoy him? Or do I want to have lunch with he's a friend, but he's kind of a downer, he's sort of ungrateful, tends to be judgmental, talks about other people. I'm going to discern that I want to have my lunch with my friend Dov. It doesn't mean that the other person is bad. One is good, one is bad. I don't have to judge. I should discern. So one way I bring this out in the gain meditation is Again, we're doing our deep, slow breathing. Maybe we picture an image of the Earth apparently suspended in space, one of these beautiful NASA images. And we tell ourselves the Earth, it's a beautiful planet, but it's just a planet. It's neither good nor bad. And that sort of resonates. It's just a planet. It's neither good nor bad. And so it's only logical for me to think, I'm just a person. I am neither good nor bad. I'm just the human being that I am, neither good nor bad. I simply am. And then we link this I amness to the slow, deep breathing. And then we go back to the breath and we open our eyes and we're ready to go out in the world. This is just a simple visual exercise in learning to drop the judgment. Things don't have to be good or bad. They just are the way they are.
I'd like to share, if it's okay with you, I'd like to share a little story from one of my great teachers, Parthasadhyji, who was the dean of the Vedanta University in Bombay, which of course is not Bombay anymore. By the way, that shows you how old I am. But I was sitting with Parthasadhyji and we were out on this lawn and I said something, and of course I was being judgmental. 23, knew everything, and I was extremely judgmental. And he said, this doesn't help you. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do? And he said, you must be discerning. Now, remember, he was from India and, had a very Indian accent. I'm not allowed to do politically correct anymore. He and I actually got along great. We had a lot of fun together as well. But he was a profoundly knowledgeable and insightful man. And he said, you need to have greater discernment. And I just figured what he was saying was judgment. I just figured he didn't understand the word properly because Hindi was his first language. So I said, oh, you mean judgment? And he goes, no. I mean discernment. What do you mean? I don't understand. So he explains it. I go, no, that's judgment. And he goes, no. I'm listening and he says, judgment is about them. Discernment is about you. And that's the lesson that transformed everything for me. It was transformational because if it's about them, it's none of my business. If it's about me, I'm allowed to be that. So you want to smoke? Smoke away. Enjoy yourself. You want to smoke around me? I'm allowed to remove myself because it makes me want to vomit. You want to do heroin? Please do. Enjoy yourself. You can't come over and sit on my couch and do heroin. I have the discernment about what impacts me, and I have no judgment whatsoever on what you do for you. It's none of my business, and I want to bless you in the process. I've mentioned this before. I give homeless people money, and I'll give them $5, $10, $20. I always give them one qualification, and I say I have one thing about this, and they're like, I can see their eyes rolling, even if they don't happen, and because they're thinking I'm going to say get a meal or some bullshit that I'm going to put a judgment on them. And I say I have one rule, and they go, what's that? And I go, do whatever the heck you want with it. It's your money, not mine. Because I don't have that judgment. And it was one of the ways that I learned to get away from the judgment and embrace the discernment. And so what I love about GAIN and the way you've laid it out is, yes, as you said, this is a 3-minute exercise. And even lunatics like me who don't seem to have any time can find 3 minutes. But what's more is if you do the 3 minutes, and let's say you get ambitious and you do 3 minutes in the morning, you do 3 minutes at night, within a period of time, it will be the way you live. And that's what I love about this. As opposed to, please go off and spend 10 years in a monastery or do the stupid things like I had to do, like travel the world to study with great spiritual masters. Those were great things for me to do. But in fact, the GAIN process allows you to still have a wife or a husband or children or grandchildren, a job, maybe 2 jobs. You can still do all that and get all the benefits. The stories aren't as good, but the benefits are all there.
Yeah. I would just say about the judgment thing, we can eventually learn what's most difficult, and that's to drop the self-judgment.
Yes.
So I like what you said about the discernment being about others and not judgment, but I would take it one step further in a way and say that we're all well served by dropping the self-judgment too. That's why in the N exercise that I mentioned, we look at the Earth, it's obviously just a planet. It's not good or bad intrinsically. Let's look at ourselves the same way. We're just a human being. We're neither good nor bad. We just are the way we are. Eventually, we can sit with that and accept it and even be grateful for it.
That's good. We're coming towards the end, and one of the things I want people to grasp about this, because your book is a little book. It's easy to read. It's simple. It's not complex. And so anybody can grab it. You can read it on a plane. You can read it on a car ride, somebody else driving, hopefully. But it's simple and it's easy to do. And what I just want to address here, because I think that we are so disassociated from the stress that we're marinating in on a daily basis that we don't even notice it. We don't notice it. And people go, oh, I feel so good when I'm in the forest, or I feel so good when I'm on the beach. It's because you live in such high stress and you don't even notice. You got desensitized to it. I want people to go read your book. I want people to go buy your book. But I just want them also to have the realization of the long-term impact of chronic stress, which seems like we all live in.
Absolutely. Well, there are 4 diseases of aging, basically, and they all have a common or a small set of common initiators. They're cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, which is really obesity and type 2 diabetes, neurodegenerative disease like dementia, including Alzheimer's, and cancer. Those are the 4 diseases of aging, and I would posit that aging itself is a disease. And what's the cause of these diseases and aging? Chronic stress, oxidative stress, which is a whole other topic, and sleep, exercise, and nutrition. What we eat, when we eat, of course, exercise, a focus on sleep hygiene and recognizing how important sleep is to our brain and our physiology. But it's really chronic stress that is one of the most important drivers of all of these disease processes. And the sooner we realize that, the better.
So, Greg, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Please make sure people know how to find you, how to find the book. If you're on any social media, let people know where that is. I want people to have access to the resources that you have available.
Sure. Well, the website is greghammermd.com, greghammermd.com. I think there's a link to the Facebook page. And then I'm on Instagram. I haven't really done a lot with social media, but I'm going to kind of bump it up a level in the next 6 months.
Okay. We'll make sure that all those links are posted in the show notes so that you can get access to all of them, because it is important. And I really want to challenge you, dear listener, to not just listen to this podcast. It's great that you listen. I'm grateful that you listen, and thank you for listening, and thank you for sharing the show with everybody else. But more important than anything is that you do something with it. This is a very practical process. Go grab the book. It's Gain Without Pain. It's easy to find. It's on all the platforms. Because really, when you look at GAIN and what it's about, you heard me say this at the end of every show. Those who control the meaning for the tribe or for themselves also control the movement of the tribe. If you're giving life the meaning of high stress, you're going to live a life of high stress. Leaders committed to positively shaping the political and business landscape know that you've got to tap into human behavior. This is your opportunity to do that. I'm Dov Baron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe, because unified actualized meaning is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for all individuals and companies. Remember, we need your help in staying relevant, so please go to wherever it is that you tune into the show from, rate, review, and subscribe. And if you are a regular listener, big thank you to you. We really appreciate it, and thank you for letting everybody you know about the show. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about your levels of stress and what you've just accepted as being just a stressful thing that you have complete control over through Greg's method, through the GAIN method. It's not complex, it's simple, and don't take that for granted because, I'll write it off because it's simple. No, it's profoundly impactful. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you, tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, in your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.